What if the person you never meant to notice becomes the only one you can't stop seeing? The wind turned red by sundown in Santa Alma, rolling across the dry land like something wild hunting for a place to break. Elias Redhawk stood on the porch with a rusted horseshoe in his hand and a tight ache in his shoulder from mending fences all morning. The storm clouds hadn't formed yet, but the sky carried a bruised warning. He could feel something coming, not danger exactly, but change, the kind that digs into a man's life without asking permission. He lifted his eyes toward the road, where slow, tired dust rose behind a swayback mule pulling a worn wagon. Two figures sat on the bench. One sat straight and steady, the kind of woman carved from hard years and harder choices. The other sat smaller, but round, like the wind had not learned how to move her. Elias squinted against the red light as the wagon rolled closer. His jaw tightened. He needed help, but that didn't mean he had to like what was coming. The wagon stopped in front of the porch, wheels whining like they were begging for rest. The older woman climbed down first, boots strong on the ground. "You Redhawk?" she asked, voice lined with something solid. "I am. I'm Dolores Reyes. Here's my daughter, Nina." The younger woman stood slowly. Her boots sank into the sand like the earth took a moment to accept her weight. Her head stayed down, her hands folded behind her skirt, and her cheeks flushed in a way Elias couldn't read. Heat or nerves? Maybe both. Dolores looked him over, then looked straight into his eyes. "You sent word you needed help. We came." "I did," Elias said. "You cook?" "I fed men with more dirt under their nails than sense in their heads. Army boys, miners, church drunks. I can cook." She paused. "And her too." Nina lifted her eyes for just a heartbeat, and Elias felt something strange move inside him. She didn't look scared. She didn't look hopeful. She looked steady, like someone who had learned how to stand in storms without shaking. "She doesn't talk much," Dolores said, "but she works harder than most men." Elias nodded once and stepped aside to let them in. The house smelled like cedar and loneliness. The kitchen had been silent since Clara Jane died. No warmth, no light, nothing left but wood and memory. Dolores moved with purpose, unpacking the few things they had. Nina followed behind her, touching each surface gently, almost apologizing to the house for entering it. Elias watched them from the hallway, unseen. Dolores gave orders with a tilt of her chin. Nina obeyed without shrinking. There was strength in her quiet, a kind that didn't need noise to prove itself. By dusk, biscuits rose in the oven, and bean stew bubbled slow and thick. Elias sat at the table, unsure what to do with the sight of someone else moving in his kitchen. Dolores poured him coffee without asking. Nina brought a plate to him, their fingers brushing. Her hand trembled a little. His didn't. They ate mostly in silence. "Ma says you got cattle trouble," Nina said suddenly, surprising even herself. "I got fence trouble," Elias replied. "I can't keep 'em fixed long enough." "I can mend," she said, voice small but certain. He looked at her, studying her calm expression. No bragging, no doubt, just truth. Later, Elias stepped onto the porch as the sky darkened. Through the window, he saw Nina kneading dough, her arms soft and dusted white, her sleeves rolled up, her hands moving slow and steady. Something inside him tightened. This house had not smelled like life in years. He didn't know why it hit him so hard, but it did. That night, he couldn't sleep. The house creaked in new places, the wind shifted, and above him, from the loft where Nina slept, he heard a soft humming, a shy tune, a kind that didn't ask to be heard but carried anyway. He lay awake listening. The next morning broke sharp and gold. Elias stepped outside with his coffee, but he didn't stay long. Inside, the house was full again. Dolores at the stove, Nina at the table kneading, her eyes focused and her breath steady. "You make it smell like home," Elias said before he could stop himself. Nina looked up, startled. "It's just bread, sir." "No," he said softly. "It ain't." Quote. She dropped her eyes and kept working, but her cheeks warmed a shade deeper, By noon, Elias was out fixing the far fence line. The sun beat down, and sweat ran from his hairline to his jaw. When he looked back toward the house, he saw Nina at the kitchen window, her shadow moving slow behind the curtain. It eased something in him he didn't know needed easing. It wasn't love. Not yet. But something old inside him shifted. Late that afternoon, a rider from town approached with a grin too sharp to trust. "Word is you hired 2 women," the man said. "One older, one young. Folks are already talking." "Rye." Elias didn't answer. He didn't have to. The rider tossed him a small sack of salt, smirked, and rode away, dust kicking up under the horse's hooves. That night at supper, Nina was quiet, her shoulders curled in, her eyes low. She didn't have to say it. Elias knew the sound of shame that didn't belong to the one who carried it. After the dishes, she stood by the sink, folding a cloth she had already folded twice. "People in town like to talk," she said, voice soft and unsteady. "Too much." Elias leaned in the doorway. "Let them." "You don't mind what they say?" she asked without turning. "I mind if you start believing it." She turned then, eyes bright with something fragile, something real. He didn't look away. And for the first time since she stepped onto his porch, she didn't look away either. What if the whole town tries to shame you for something you never did, just because they cannot stand to see someone like you rise? The next morning came with a thin frost on the ground, rare for early fall. The ranch looked quiet, but not broken. Smoke rose from the kitchen chimney, warm and steady. Elias walked toward the porch with tired steps, rubbing his hands together from the cold. Inside, the house breathed with a new rhythm. Dolores was rolling biscuit dough, with the ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Nina stood beside the table, shaping loaves, her braid hanging over her shoulder, her face calm but different. Not timid, not afraid, just unsure where she fit in this new place. Elias watched them from the doorway. "You two need anything?" he asked. Nina didn't look up. "We're all right." Dolores didn't stop rolling. "We'll manage. The fire in the stove still listens to us." Elias nodded and walked back out, but he lingered on the steps longer than he meant to. Something about the sound of their movements inside made the empty parts of his life feel less hollow. The day passed slow. A strange calm hung over the ranch. The barn still stood then, the roof dry and ready to catch the wrong kind of spark. Elias checked every corner of the property, though he couldn't say what he was looking for. Maybe peace, maybe trouble, maybe something in between. By midday, Dolores found him in the yard. "We're low on salt and flour," she said. "Town's waiting." Elias didn't miss the look Nina gave her mother. Quiet worry, quiet dread. "We'll go tomorrow," he said. But Dolores shook her head. "No, today. Take her with you. The sooner she looks those people in the eye, the sooner their words lose their bite." Nina looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just nodded slowly. The ride into Santa Alma was heavy with silence. Elias rode ahead on his mare. The wagon wheels squeaked behind him. Nina sat stiff beside her mother, hands gripping the seat so tight her knuckles went pale. "You okay?" Elias asked, glancing back. She gave a small nod. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how people look at me," she said, "like they already decided who I am." Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. She already knew he understood. When they reached town, the usual noise dipped for a heartbeat. Folks paused. Not long, but enough to feel. Elias tied his horse and stepped inside the store. Dolores and Nina followed. The smell of molasses and kerosene filled the air. Ms. Pearson stood behind the counter, eyes sharp enough to cut. "Well," she said, "Red Hawk's house finally has company, and such interesting company at that." Dolores ignored her. Nina didn't move, but the words sliced through the air like a blade. "Most men hire one cook," Miss Pearson continued, "but I suppose Mr. Red Hawk hired extra help." Someone laughed in the corner. Nina's cheeks burned. Her hands shook. Dolores touched her back, steadying her, but the damage was done. Elias came from the feed room, saw the way the room tilted against her, and his jaw locked tight. "You best mind your tongue, Mrs. Pearson," he said, voice low and even. She blinked. It was only talk. "Talk sticks," Elias said, "and some folks bleed from it longer than others." Silence spread like dust settling after a gunshot. He picked up the sack, nodded for Nina and Dolores to follow, and walked out the door without another word. Outside, the sun was hot, and the quiet felt sharp. Nina walked faster than usual, trying to outrun the sting on her skin. Dolores reached for her, but Nina stepped away, whispering, "I'm fine, Ma." But her voice cracked, and both Elias and Dolores heard it. The ride home was silent. Back at the ranch, Nina cooked in complete quiet. No humming, no soft breathing, just motion. Her hands sliced vegetables with the kind of focus that comes from holding in something too heavy to set down. Supper was simple stew. No one said much. Elias watched her carefully, seeing the way she held her shame like armor. Dolores felt it too. When the dishes were done, she stepped outside to give them room. Inside, Nina stood near the sink, drying her hands on a worn cloth. She didn't look at Elias. "People talk," she said. "Too much." Elias leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. "Let them. You don't mind?" "I mind if you start believing them." She turned slowly. Her eyes were full in a way that made his chest ache. "Why do you look at me like I'm worth something?" she asked. "Because you are," he replied. She blinked, as if she wasn't sure she heard right. "You're quiet because you've been taught the world don't want your voice," he said softly. "And you're strong because you learned to survive without kindness." Her breath hitched. She looked down. "It hurts to be seen." "It hurts more to stay hidden," he said. Her eyes lifted to his exactly then, not shy, not afraid, just real. That night, Dolores found a letter in a drawer, tucked under old cloths. She knocked on Elias's door and handed it to him. "Clara Jane wrote this," she said. "Might be yours to finish." Elias unfolded it slow. "If someone brings warmth back to the porch, don't run from it. Love don't always look the same, but when it feels like breathing again, let it." He read it twice, then stared at the wall, lost in a past he had carried too long. Meanwhile, above him in the loft, Nina lay awake, hearing her mother breathe slow beside her. She touched her chest once, right where her heart beat too fast. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her and not flinched. And that alone changed everything. The next day, the wind shifted again, carrying a smell Elias knew too well. Smoke. What if the moment danger comes is the same moment you finally learn who you are and who will stand with you? The smell of smoke reached the ranch before the flames did. A sharp, bitter scent carried on the wind, the kind that makes a man's chest tighten with fear he refuses to speak out loud. Elias stepped out onto the porch, eyes locking on the horizon. A black strand of smoke curled upward like a warning finger tracing the sky. He didn't waste a breath. "Fire!" he said. Dolores dropped the spoon she was holding. Nina stepped toward the door, her face turning pale, but her jaw tightening in a way that surprised even her mother. "Where?" Dolores asked. "Ridgeline," Elias said. "And the wind's pushing it toward us." They didn't panic. There wasn't time. Nina grabbed the water barrels. Dolores soaked burlap sacks. Elias ran to the shed, pulling out shovels, ropes, whatever he could find to fight the edge of the fire. The breeze shifted again, hot and sharp. Embers began dropping like angry sparks onto the dry land. "Start at the fence line!" Elias yelled. They ran. The fire moved fast, licking low at first, then rising hungry. Elias beat at the flames with the shovel. Dolores threw water over the ground. Nina slammed soaked sacks against burning patches, coughing through the smoke as the heat stung her face. A spark landed on her skirt. She slapped it out with her bare hand. "Careful!" Elias shouted. "I am." she yelled back, not slowing for a second. She stumbled once, ash stinging her eyes, but she straightened before Elias could reach her. She moved like someone who refused to let fear take root. The wind screamed through the trees. Sparks flew in every direction. The flames snapped and grew. The barn roof caught. A deep, angry crack rolled through the air. "No!" Elias shouted, racing toward it. "Elias, don't!" Nina cried, chasing after him. Inside the barn, the smoke was thick, low, rolling like a second skin across the floor. The horses screamed, kicking against the stalls. Elias tore the gates open, shoving them out one by one. The last mare refused to move, eyes wide with fear. "Go!" he shouted. Nina pushed past him. She clapped her hands, shouting loud and sharp, and the mare bolted through the door, but the beam above them gave a long, awful groan. It snapped. Nina saw it falling, and dove. Elias grabbed her by the waist, dragging her backward just in time as the beam hit the dirt where she had stood. They tumbled into the open air, coughing, gasping, shaking. Behind them the barn collapsed, flames swallowing everything. For a long moment they lay on the ground near the well, breathing smoke and dust. The world turned quiet except for the crackle of dying embers in the distance. Nina laughed first. A stunned laugh, part relief, part disbelief. "You're mad," she whispered, her voice shaking. Elias rolled onto his back, staring up at the smoke-filled sky. "Takes a madman to fight the wind." She looked at him, soot on her cheek, hair sticking to her face, eyes bright even through the ash. "You could have died," she said. "So could you." She swallowed hard. "Then maybe we would have burned together." He turned to her. Her words weren't dramatic or soft. They were true, simple, honest. The kind that sinks deep. They stood once the wind shifted, pushing the fire north. The worst had passed, but the land was scarred black. The barn was gone. The wheat was ash. They had survived. Barely. Hours later, after the last flame died, after the last bucket was emptied, they sat together on the porch steps. Dolores slept inside, exhausted. Nina rested her head against the porch post. Elias sat beside her, shoulders heavy but heart strangely lighter. "This place still stands," she said. "Because of you," he said. She turned slowly. "Because of us." The night fell again, quiet and cool. Elias pulled a folded letter from his pocket. Clara Jane's handwriting glowed faint in the moonlight. "If someone brings warmth back to the porch, don't run from it." Nina watched him read. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. The next morning brought rain. Finally, soft, steady, kind rain. The land drank it like a blessing. Shoots of green would rise by tomorrow. Life again. By noon, the ranch bustled. Elias sorted broken boards. Dolores mended what she could. Nina baked bread, humming again in the kitchen, her voice low and warm. Later, Elias found her near the well. She held a daisy in her hand, small, bright, stubborn, just like her. "It survived the fire," she said. "So did we," he replied. She looked down, then back up with something new in her eyes, something sure. "You never meant to love me," she whispered. He stepped closer, gently brushing soot from her cheek with his thumb. "Maybe that's why I did." She didn't blush. She didn't look away. She simply breathed, steady and strong. And for the first time, Elias felt his heart breathe too. The rains fell again that night, soft against the roof, steady, like the land telling its own story, one of ruin and healing, of fire and regrowth, of people burned by the world but still choosing to stay open. Inside the warm house, bread cooled on the table. Dolores dozed by the hearth. Elias and Nina stood shoulder to shoulder, looking out at the wet earth and the gentle, dark sky. Two souls who never meant to find each other. Two hearts learning how to grow after everything had burned. And slowly, like new life rising through ashes, love took root.